So welcome everyone to this SEEE webinar on wellbeing and managing stress, and we're very grateful for you to come along today, and a huge thank you to Corinna Hartwig, who's joining us as our speaker today. For those of you who don't know, Social Enterprises of England are running a whole range of webinars this week. They're all free, social enterprises, so by all means have a look on our website to see if there's any others that you would like to join. And if you're not already a member, you can join us as a member, which is free of charge if your turnover is under 100,000. So it's a good way of getting access to information and events and that kind of thing. So Corinna is very kindly joining us from Hertfordshire Growth Hub. Obviously this talk today isn't just linked to just Hertfordshire, it's for anyone, and I think especially this month and pandemic times, wellbeing is always very important for us to learn about for our teams and for ourselves. So I'll hand over now to Corinna.
Thank you very much, Jane. Thank you for the introductions. So let's start around the subject on how to relieve stress and anxiety. So as I said, welcome to the lunchtime webinar on ways on how to reduce the stresses for you and your teams. And my name is Corinna Hartwig, and I'm working here part-time at the Hertfordshire Growth Hub as one of the SME Wellbeing and Resilience Program coordinators. Just to let you know, as it flows in as well, I've been on board during the pandemic, and I mainly work remote from home and only managed to meet my job share twice in real life. So anyway, we'll come back to that later. So just to set the scene a little bit, obviously the pandemic, Brexit, and an increased demand for the VCSE organizations to deliver more services at reduced funding have a significant impact on our day-to-day lives and our ways of working. Trying to adapt to the constant changes can increase feelings of stress. As an antidote for these difficulties you face, I'm showing you today a simple and practical toolkit that you can apply for yourself, but also hopefully in your workplace. And after the session, you will better understand the different stresses that you and your team face, and hopefully learn ways to reduce the stress. And it should help you to take back control so that you and your team can be better motivated and be more productive. In order to get to know you just a tiny bit better, could you please be so kind and put in the chat if you are a startup social enterprise or an existing social enterprise, and if you have any employees, how many you have. That would be great. So if you could just share that in the chat right now, and maybe just say where you're based as well, that would help. That would be brilliant. I mean, you feel free to kind of unmute yourselves as well if you want to, if it's easier. Just bear in mind the session is recorded, as Jane said. So if you feel more comfortable putting it in a chat, then that's absolutely fine. Whilst you're doing that, I will tell you a few lines just about the Hertfordshire Growth Hub. Let me just check the chat quickly. That's brilliant. Oh, okay. So we're part-time staff and volunteers. Oh, okay. So we have a social enterprise that's considered a startup, and then we have a very well established one a bit further afield in Ireland. Okay, that's brilliant information. My slide should change. There we go. Let me introduce just very quickly what the Growth Hub does. The Hertfordshire Growth Hub is a central point of access for business support in Hertfordshire and offers a wealth of support, including workplace well-being. The Hertfordshire Growth Hub is delivered by a consortium of partners on behalf of the Hertfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership, and support is free to access and available to all businesses in Hertfordshire, including, of course, social enterprises and charities with a trading arm. here is a very brief overview of the partners we work with. And if you're a startup in Hertfordshire, you might recognize names such as Wenta or perhaps Stunter, who are startup support agencies. But you might also recognize the Hertfordshire Community Foundation, who looks after the third sector across Hertfordshire. And if you do have any questions regarding the Growth Hub, just ask me at the end of the session. That will be brilliant. So let's get back to our subject, as you have come here today to really find out how you can reduce stress. Of course, Margaret, you can stay on. That's absolutely fine. Yes, please stay with us. No, the more the merrier. Hang on, let me just, sorry, I just need to rearrange slightly my screen here. So let's talk about stress. And let's talk first of all about typical stresses. Because in order for us to reduce stress, we need to first understand what stress is. So perhaps in the chat, if you can share, and if you feel comfortable to share, write down one stress factor that you are bringing with you today into the virtual webinar. That would be quite good. But just please, share what you feel comfortable today, and we'll agree on a bit of confidentiality during the duration of the webinar. So someone has a sick child at home and too much work, not enough time, okay? And then on top, you've kind of taken out time during your lunch break. So that's perhaps an extra stress factor. And some of Margaret's staff are absent due to COVID, which is sad to hear, and obviously very stressful times. So let me just tell you a little bit about stress and anxiety after you shared the ones that you're bringing into the room today. Generally, we experience stress and anxiety when an event or a situation triggers our brain to keep us safe from a perceived danger. So stress hormones are released in the body, which trigger a fight, a flight, or a freeze response. This can lead to certain physical, mental, behavioral, and emotional responses in us. So the first one, the fight response, is when our body goes into a state of stress, and you might feel agitated and aggressive toward other people. This is because our bodies naturally go into this stage of fight, which is a reaction to ward off danger. And it dates from very, very long time ago when we needed to fight predators. And as I said, it triggers aggression. And in most situations in our modern day lives, however, it can obviously negatively affect relationships or even ruin reputations. The second response, the flight response, is another natural reaction, and our bodies and brains go into a state of flight, which can be a useful mode again for survival. For example, when we find ourselves in dangerous surroundings, it triggers the impulse to run away or hide. In everyday life, however, we are often unable to run away, and when we do, we realize that the stressor is quick to catch up with us. And finally, the freeze response sets the stage for dysregulation for some people. And in this case, the energy mobilized by the perceived threat gets locked into the nervous system and we freeze. It obviously triggers the behavior like of a rabbit in headlights, and we find ourselves unable to react or to think properly. This response sometimes reveals itself when we actually breathe. Holding our breath and shallow breathing is in stressful situations are both forms of a freeze response. And the occasional deep sigh is the nervous system catching up on its oxygen intake. Stress in the body is the body's response when it senses danger, and we all experience stress and need it to function. But when the stress interferes with our lives, it becomes a problem, and too much stress for too long can make us ill. Then, because stress levels go up because we try to protect the things that we care about, like our safety, our loved ones, our homes, businesses, and jobs, and we can feel a lack of control over a situation. And sometimes stress levels also go up because we make social comparisons of ourselves to others. And that's often a stress factor that happens if we consume too much social media, for example. So now we understand better our three natural modes of response to stress. Let's try to differentiate the stresses that we encounter in the workplace. So can you share now in the chat, please, an example of a typical stress that you experience in the workplace, please? So whilst you are typing, I can just give you a bit of background from a survey that the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development conducted around health and well-being at work in 2021. And it shows that the main causes of employee stress include workloads and the volume of work, management style, relationships at work, new work-related demands or challenges due to home working because of COVID-19, pandemic-related anxiety, for example, fear of contagion in the workplace or in the commute, a poor work-life balance due to home working because of the pandemic. And there are obviously numerous non-work-related factors, which might include obviously personal illness, like we have a case today in the family, or health issues and relationship or family issues. And yes, there's also the Monday morning anxiety, too much work, too much noise coming your way. And clash of personalities you mentioned in the chat, and time pressures and conflict, absolutely. So now we understand a bit better the stress, what stress is and what it triggers. Let's take a look how we can hang on, sorry, 1 second. My desktop here is not as responsive as it should. I need to go back. Sorry, I do apologize. I'm just going to stop sharing just for a second. I'm sorry about that. That normally doesn't happen.
Don't worry, Corinna, not a problem.
And I don't quite, just give me 1 second. So I found myself back. So sorry. Now I'm going to share my screen with you again. Right, hopefully I'm back on track. Okay, we understood now the different stresses and the triggers. So now we're going to have a little look what's happening in our stress container, in our stress bucket. And I'd like to introduce you to the stress bucket, which is a really helpful tool that can help you to think about your own well-being and that of your workforce. So the stress bucket represents a container for stress. And basically, it represents the container, and you need to imagine that the stress comes above and flows in, a bit like rain coming out of the dark clouds on a gloomy grey Monday. Now, when there are very low levels of stress in the bucket, we are in a relaxed state. And I would really encourage you just to remember now that feeling of being totally relaxed. Remember that feeling when you last went maybe on a holiday, or the last time you sat in a quiet corner, maybe with a candle and something, a nice hot drink, and you relaxed. Or remember when you saw the blue sky and the sunshine last. That was only last week it was out. It's really important that you remember that feeling of total relaxation and that you go back to that feeling on a regular basis throughout the day, and perhaps find something that allows you to remember that feeling easily. Maybe have a photo pinned next to your desktop, or some of us might use tapping, or perhaps a smell or music might trigger the state of relaxation again. Because we all experience moments of stress, and sometimes stress can be good and it can push us hard to work, but too much stress obviously can make us feel overworked, overwhelmed, and prolonged stress can eventually lead to problems and make us ill. So of course we can't avoid stress factors flowing into our container, and at the moment there are many factors that are out of our control. But there are also factors that are within our control that contribute to the volume of stress and anxiety in our bucket. My system is really still very slow at changing the slides. Now, let's have a look at how do you know when your stress bucket is getting too full. Can you maybe share again in the chat what could be signs that your stress bucket is overflowing? And once you do that, I'll give you some general ones. But signs that the bucket might be overflowing will vary, but generally some of these are: you might feel irritable, aggressive, impatient or wound up, overburdened, anxious, nervous or afraid. Like you might feel like your thoughts are racing, you can't switch off and you are unable to enjoy yourself. Perhaps you're feeling depressed or uninterested in work or life. And sometimes it feels like you've lost your sense of humor, or you might have a sense of dread if it overflows. You might also find that you worry more about your health than you would do normally. And another sign that your stress bucket is overflowing could be that you feel neglected or lonely. So obviously, if the stress bucket overflows, problems will develop. This is because if stress is unaddressed, it can cause mental health issues like depression or anxiety and harm our physical health. To put things into perspective, about 1 in 6 British workers will experience depression, anxiety, or stress-related issues, according to the Mental Health First Aid England at some point. It's therefore really helpful to take a moment and note the different factors that fill your bucket above the normal line and to differentiate between those. It helps to pause for a moment and write down all the different stress factors on different post-it notes and group them to identify which ones we have in control or control over, and which ones are the ones that are totally out of our control. And then start to address maybe our stress. And Mental Health First Aid for England actually has a conversation online with the hashtag address your stress. So feel free to have a little look there as well, how you can address your stress. But back to our factors. So factors that are out of our control are probably related to the pandemic uncertainty. Factors out of our control probably also are related to the economic downturn and the recession, maybe a lack of funding for your social enterprises, and also the large-scale climate changes, for example, could be some of those. So with regards to outside of your control factors relating to your enterprise that we identified in the previous slide, you could also use a PESTLE framework. This can help you to look at the political, economic, social, technological, and environmental and legal macro environmental factors of your organization. And you might have done one as part of your business plan quite a while ago. But if you want to refresh that, Unlimited has a really good kind of template, a PESTLE overview and template, and we'll send you the link after the webinar for that if you wanted to look that up. But it's even more important to make a note of the factors that are within our control. So such as time management, healthy lifestyles, upskilling ourselves, or asking for help. After we have identified what fills our bucket to dangerous levels and noted the signs of an overflowing stress bucket and categorized our different stresses, we can now think about what helps us to ease the pressures, a bit like the tabs at the bottom of our bucket. To release stress and lessen it, you could try to open some of the tabs at the bottom of the stress bucket. So could you maybe share some ideas of helpful coping strategies briefly in the chat? And whilst you do that, I will give you some general examples. So for example, ways of reducing stress and coping strategies are obviously, the first ones should be around physical well-being. So make sure that you take regular physical activity, that you have a well-balanced diet and enough quality sleep. Of course, you know that, but I just need to remind you to really do that. And go for a walk, even if it's a cold, grey Monday morning before you sit at your desk. The other one is obviously look after your mental well-being, relaxation, meditation, mindfulness, yoga, maintaining social contact, even if it's virtual, and manage your boundaries are really, really important. Further, reflective practice, which is an opportunity to learn from experience and acknowledge what you can and cannot control. And we've hopefully done a little bit of that right now. And then seeking additional support through peer support or from your manager, if you have one, or from organizations like the Social Enterprise East of England or the Herts Growth Hub, where we obviously have the SME Wellbeing program running. So these are clearly helpful coping strategies. And when these tabs are working well, they will reduce the stress levels and you will feel more in control. And feeling in control will help you to rebalance your well-being and free up some positive energies. But there are also some unhelpful coping strategies who are obviously best avoided. And do you perhaps have a few examples of unhelpful coping strategies that you could kind of share in the chat? Just having a look at your responses. So chocolate, yes. Oh, especially today. It was my birthday yesterday as well. So I got quite a bit of chocolate. What goes well with chocolate, actually? Oh, thank you. Wine, absolutely. But thank you for the happy birthday. Yes. So obviously drinking too much alcohol, but also perhaps drinking too much caffeine, and coffee and chocolate go really well together. Eating obviously too much sugar and the wrong foods. But another unhelpful coping strategy could be, for example, to criticize yourself, negative self-talk. Oh, I've been eating too much chocolate today, for example. But also becoming aggressive or violent, hitting someone, throwing or kicking someone or something, hopefully not. But anyway, kind of barking back perhaps at family or partners. Yes, again, eating too much or too little and the wrong foods is obviously not good for you. And sometimes an unhelpful coping strategies for the ones of here in the room who drive to work might be perhaps driving too fast in a car. These are obviously all best avoided, as they can really lead to the taps at the bottom of the stress bucket to get blocked. And therefore it contributes to increased stress levels again, potentially to the bucket overflowing once more. So now a few words about resilience. Resilience is the ability to manage the stress levels in your bucket. It allows you to bounce back from setbacks, to recover, and resilience allows you to function, work, and be healthy. Don't forget that aspects such as the shape or size of your bucket, how old it is, how well the release taps are working, and whether it has its knocks are all factors that will influence your very personal resilience. So here's just a reminder of the helpful coping strategies and the unhelpful coping strategies. So now, how can you use the stress bucket in your organization? If you are a small organization, or if you're by yourself, you can use the bucket tool for yourself or for each member of the management board, for example, or the trustees, or as an organizational bucket. And I'm just going to duck down for a minute. And I don't know if you can see it, but you can have a real life bucket, actually. And if you're a bigger enterprise, you can use it for your key staff or key teams. So how to use it? Staff members can be encouraged to use the idea of the stress container to help them in stressful situations. As we just discussed, it can also be used in group or team settings to help to identify what some of the stresses might be for your staff. This can be done anonymously by writing stresses on individual pieces of paper, scrunching them up, and start throwing them into the centrally placed bin, the bucket, the container. And you can all then look at the different pieces of paper and the different stress factors together, or you could do it after the session, depending how you want to manage it. This activity obviously has to be facilitated and managed well, or it could turn easily into a whinging session, which you don't really want. But it's really important that you can identify the different stresses that are existing in your organization, in your teams. And once you identify them, then you can start addressing them. And of course, you want to ensure that there are positive outcomes to this session. So staff can also be asked for their suggestions of which tabs they would like to use on their very own stress buckets. And therefore you can really learn a lot from your team in terms of reducing stress. If you work with remote teams, I would recommend that you use visual digital tools such as Google Jamboard or Mirrorboard that you can use to do this exercise in the digital world and with kind of hybrid working members of staff. And what are the benefits to use the tool? Well, evidence shows that by reducing the causes of stress at work, there are many benefits to the employer, including making staff healthier and happier at work, improving performance and productivity, reducing absence levels, decrease presenteeism, reduce workplace disputes, and we had that at the beginning, I think, and making the organization more attractive, perhaps, to job seekers and retain your staff. And don't forget that as an employer, you also have legal obligations to ensure the health and safety and welfare of all your employees. And as part of this, an employer must conduct a risk assessment for work-related stress and take actions to prevent staff from experiencing a stress-related illness because of work. And we'll give you a link to the HSE later for your risk assessment. Further, health and well-being is one of the ESG, which are a set of environmental, social, and governance standards that will help you with good governance for your company operations. And it's part also now of a criteria used by many investors. So if you're looking for funding, you might want to embed health and well-being properly in your organization and in your strategies. And in addition, well-being is the fifth theme in the social value model, and demonstrating good governance around workplace well-being should score you points when you're bidding for contracts. Now, what other tools can you use in the workplace? So, of course, again, the stress bucket, the container, as you discovered today. But another tool that can be useful for you is having a proper well-being strategy. And if the well-being strategy at the moment seems a bit to a high level, you can also do well-being action plans. You've got a photo there on your slide, but I've got a real one here. A well-being action plan is a very simple document that you can fill in yourself. You can fill in with your employees, or your team member can fill it in separately, but it's a good tool to kind of share all aspects of how they're feeling at work, what triggers perhaps a stress situation, how their personal response is, and what is best avoided in the workplace. And if you are managing teams, it's a really good tool and a basis to have this slightly perhaps trickier conversations, or also just to have conversations around well-being, just like you would have around a physical well-being. So for example, a question for that is in the wellness action plan is, for example, what support can your manager or colleagues put in place to minimize triggers and to support you during a stressful time? So everyone can complete a wellness action plan. You don't need to have a mental health problem in order to feel the benefits of it. It just means that you already have practical steps in place to ensure you're supported when you aren't feeling great. You can download it for free from mind.org.uk or from the Herts Growth Hub website as well. And it really helps to having the management buy-in for well-being in the workplace overall. That is really the most important bit. Then embed a health and well-being in your organizational culture and in your values by having a well-being strategy. And finally, top tip as well is check in on a regular basis with your team informally or perhaps in formal ways, but at the moment, at least really weekly, to see how they are, be nosy, and also observe if there's any changes in their behavior to make sure that they are well. The Mind also has a well-being or wellness action plan for working from home to download. So if you are a one-man band at the moment, you can use that for yourself as well. And it's really good also if you're working from home, not only because you are perhaps the only director in your organization, but if you're working from home as part of a hybrid team, if you're doing the Wellbeing Action Plan for you working hybridly from home, it's a good tool to share with your family as well, to establish those boundaries that came up in the chat as well earlier on. So just very, very briefly now, so kind of give the stress bucket a go, really, and head over to our website and download the free Mind Wellbeing Action Plan. And on our website, on the Hertfordshire Growth Hub website, we also have quite a few on-demand videos around wellbeing in the workplace. Because everyone has been affected by the pandemic, and we've been all in the same storm, but in different boats. And sometimes the storms and the wind alter, and sometimes the waves are not quite as high and a bit smaller, but then they come again. So don't forget, we're still all in that storm, just in different boats. But our buckets are all of different shapes and sizes, and therefore our resilience is different too. So don't forget, if you are not in a good place, you're going to find it difficult to support others. So look after yourself first. And to finish off, just a couple more tips. Practice good time management and keep communicating, set those boundaries. Talk to trusted people. We have a lot of resources on our, what we call the knowledge bank on the Hertfordshire Growth Hub website, which is a collection of useful articles, tools, and on-demand videos that can support you, especially around well-being. And don't forget to do something that you enjoy on a daily basis. For example, back in the summer, we discovered that Tam daily knits to release stress and pressures. And remember that feeling of being totally relaxed. And don't forget the blue sky that's always behind the grey clouds. So more resources and signposting. As I said, get some support from the SME Wellbeing Programme at the Hertfordshire Growth Hub, but there's other loads and loads of resources out there free to access for you as well. Get in touch with us if you want to talk about SME wellbeing, how to craft a wellbeing strategy, or if you want to start using a wellbeing action plan with staff or any other wellbeing aspects. We want your organization to be more resilient, more productive, and to do more good. And that kind of just brings me to the end of my little kind of formal presentation. And I'm thanking you for your time, and I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have. And Jane is there as well.
So thank you ever so much, Corinna, for that really useful talk and for sharing some useful tips. And thank you everyone for joining us today, and hope you can join one of our other webinars this week or another time.